I want to start with comments you made repeatedly now, referring to Massachusetts Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley and author Ibram Kendi as, quote, grand wizards of the modern KKK. Now, I understand you differ with both of them politically and probably with me. But as a graduate of Harvard and Yale universities, I believe you must be aware the Ku Klux Klan is not a political party. It's a terrorist organization. Historians view the Klan as the driving force behind lynchings of blacks in the American South, more than 4,000 people murdered from 1877 to 1950. And the group is linked to numerous other acts of racial violence continuing through the civil rights movement to the present day. You're running to be the leader of the free world, so your choice of words matter. Have you taken any time to reflect upon the possibility that comparing your political rivals to murderous terrorists might put their lives in danger at a time when hate crimes are on the rise? Or do you just don't care?
So Reverend Sharpton, I don't look at the world through political parties. Frankly, it's good to see it's been 20 years since we last spoke. And part of the reason that I came to that event 20 years ago with you is that you were a political outsider just like I am in my own party. But let me talk about the issue you're actually asking about, which is that, you know, what's toxic about that old worldview of organizations like the KKK, which have been a god-awful stain on our national history, is that they say that your skin color determines what you're allowed to say, what you're allowed to think. To say you have to shut up, sit down, and do as you're told because you're black or brown-skinned. Well, you know what Ayanna Pressley said much more recently is that we don't want any more black faces that don't want to be a black voice. We don't want any more brown faces that don't want to be a brown voice. And so, yes, I do think there are echoes of a historical ugly racism in this country now showing up in new clothing.
To say we
and
don't
what I want to lead us to as the next president
just a second.
is a
to say
united
that we
nation
do not want
where we
black
don't actually
voices,
judge each other on the color of our
To
skin.
say that is not going with sheets and burning crosses and lynching people. If she said something you disagree with,
the point I'm making,
you cannot equate Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan with somebody saying something that you think is a little controversial or a little too far. Some of our relatives were terrorized by the Ku Klux Klan. I'm trying to get you to understand the pain of that.
I know you're intellectually honest. I know you're an intellectually honest guy, and so I will remind you that Hakeem Jeffries drew analogies between Donald Trump and the Ku Klux Klan, and I don't think you had him on pressing him in the same way. So we're drawing analogies here to make a point.
He did not call Donald Trump the grand dragon of the KKK. He did not call Donald Trump an officer of the modern KKK. Let's not change what was said.
So, Reverend Sharpton, though, I'm calling out a double standard and saying that certain people can use certain analogies to make a point. Well, I'm using an analogy to make a point. And the point I'm making is we should stop seeing each other on the basis of our skin color. It was god-awful when the KKK did it. But you know what? We have to learn a lesson in the present that we're creating more racial division in this country.
But you
when you say if you have black skin, you can only think one thing.
You cannot do it being insensitive to our feeling. Like, that's like calling somebody of any kind of group that had a group that were terrorizing and killing them.
So I agree with you, we need sensitivity.
So I think we need to be very careful about that. And I wanted to raise that with you directly. Let me go to my next point.
And I respect that you're willing to have an open conversation. That's what we need in this country.
I want to ask you a couple of questions. And one thing, you know, if you talked, you mentioned we talked 20 years ago, and I'm going to get to that, but you should have known 20 years ago. You're not going to out-talk me, so let me ask my question. I'll let you talk, then I'll go back to the next point.
Goes both ways, yeah.
All right. You have no problem
illegal immigration,
with helping,
I am a hardliner on, absolutely.
You have no problem with helping those immigrants that come here and follow the law and become citizens?
I want to help every legal citizen of this country. That's what America First means, putting every American first. And you see how I run this campaign? It's very different. I've gone to the south side of Chicago, to Kensington, in the middle of Philadelphia.
Right.
I haven't called Zelensky, but I have called people in West Maui. America First means every American.
All right, let me ask you this.
But that means you have to come to this country legally, not illegally.
You say we run the country with a nation of laws and that we ought to follow the laws. Then how can you and your colleagues stand on a debate stage and say that you would endorse and support for president a man if he was convicted of breaking the law and a felony in Donald Trump? How can you say, I will put a convict back in the White House, and you say that I'm
the way our
supporting
Constitution
the law?
and laws of this country work? First of all, I'm running to be the next president, and I expect to be the next president because I want to reunite this country in a way that we badly need. But I have made a pledge to be on that debate stage, and I intend to keep it because I think the way we do things in the United States of America is that the people of this country get to decide who governs, not the administrative police state. So for better or worse, if it's a guy I disagree with or a guy I agree with, in this case, Donald Trump, I do agree with most of his policies.
But the question posed to you all,
you got to follow the Constitution. You have to follow the Constitution.
Crime. If the Constitution is clear,
so the Constitution does not eliminate you.
Conduct, he's eliminated. Let me then put it to you this way.
The Constitution governs. I believe in the Constitution, and the Constitution says we have a process for picking presidents in this country. I think we should follow it. I expect to follow it. I expect to be the next president. But even if it's not me, I will support anyone who follows that process.
If you became president, would you pardon Donald Trump for any of the crimes that he's been indicted for, or if he's convicted?
On the current facts that we have, he is one of many people that I have identified as someone I would pardon because I do not think that this sets a good precedent for our country, where a party in power uses police force to indict its political opponents in the middle of an election. There are Democrats on that list.
Wait a minute. You've got 19 people indicted. They're not running all of them. But even before you've heard the evidence, before the trials, you're saying that you would prejudge what is going to come out and try and commit to pardoning them.
That's not correct.
You claim
that's not correct. I've actually been very clear on this, Reverend. Assuming that the prosecution's statement of the facts in the indictment is the worst version of the facts, then yes, I would. So I waited till I read the indictments cover to cover. In 99% of prosecutions, you and any lawyer will also know this. That's the worst statement of the facts you're going to get for the defense.
But it's not all that's going to come out of trial. You and I know that. That's not all that's going to come out of trial. So what I said is assuming, well, I was very clear at the time. I said, I've read the indictment, and assuming these are the worst facts, then yes, on these facts, I will pardon Trump. Just as, by the way, I've said I would pardon Julian Assange, who, by my best guess, has very different politics than I do. Because, again, we applied a different standard to Julian Assange. Because when you talk about the law, you've also said that, I remember there was the big argument about you saying that people having the right to guns had something to do with slavery. When the Second Amendment was in 1791, slavery didn't end until 1865. I mean, you're very, very...
Well, I can actually share with you something about this. Chief Justice Taney, and you and I probably have some common ground here. In the Dred Scott case, which said that black people could not be citizens in the U.S., shamefully, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court gave his argument for why. He said it would allow black people to own guns in this country. That is shameful. Yes, it is part of our history. But just because some people may be for gun control today, we can't sweep that under the rug.
They didn't do the Second Amendment to help. Blacks couldn't get guns and fight. There were no, they were not fighting to give blacks guns. And when Taney said that, clearly,
so literally, that was the justification in the Dred Scott case for why black people couldn't be citizens.
Dred Scott
and the first
decision was not in
laws
1791, by the way. But one last thing.
It was before the Civil War, as you well know. And I think that we should confront our history and have an open and honest debate about it. That's what makes us stronger as a country.
Until the 13th Amendment, we couldn't vote
history and confront it.
Let me ask you one last question. We're out of time.
And that's how we unite this country.
One thing we have in common with Trump is you've been criticized for trafficking in conspiracy theories. So here goes, do you believe, let me ask you this, because you and Trump have both been accused of trafficking conspiracy theories. Do you believe Barack Obama was born in the United States, and do you think it was appropriate for Trump to suggest to otherwise, even as evidence mounted, that the claim was a lie?
I think I have every reason to believe Obama was born in the U.S., and I have never brought up that issue, and I have no idea why we're actually discussing that. But what I have talked about is, for example, Saudi Arabia was absolutely involved in 9/11, despite the fact that our government refused to acknowledge it. That COVID-19 did originate in a lab in China, despite the fact that our government called that a conspiracy theory. That we still haven't seen the transgender shooter manifesto out of Nashville. So those aren't conspiracy theories. Those are conspiracy realities. That's what matters.
Barack Obama was born in Kenya. He's a man that you said was the best president this century. Should he have continued trafficking the Kenya lie about Barack Obama?
Look, I will say, as a presidential candidate before he ran for president, I think he made absolutely the right decision to say that that was a ridiculous theory. Barack Obama was born in the United States. And frankly, I don't think we should dignify the things that aren't true versus talking about the hard things that were labeled conspiracy theories, but that are true now. So I actually believe in truth over theory. I'm tied to facts.
All right. Well, you certainly came, and you knew I was going to fight it out with you, and you stood up. Did about 3 or 4 ducks, threw a couple. We'll do this again. Thank you, 2024 presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy. Back in a moment.